Yes, it's true. We are still intervening in foreign elections. And I think the ones he's been thinking about are recent elections in Bulgaria.
I want to go back to that clip we played earlier of former CIA Director James Woolsey speaking just a few weeks ago with Laura Ingraham on Fox News.
Have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Oh, probably, but it was for the good of the system in order to avoid the communists from taking over. For example, in Europe, in 47, 48, 49, the Greeks and the Italians, we
don't do that now, though. We don't mess around other people's elections, Jeff?
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that? Do a Vine video on this former CIA director.
Only for a very good cause in the interests of democracy.
All right, thank you.
Only for a very good cause in the interests of democracy. That's former CIA Director James Woolsey. So if you could respond to what he says today, Stephen Kinzer, we're not talking about history right now, and also talk about the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, and Trump's proposal to cut it by something like 2/3 in the 2019 budget.
Well, that was a great clip, and I think maybe Woolsey's thinking back to one of his predecessors, Richard Helms, who was convicted of lying in court for denying that the United States had tried to influence the election in Chile. He didn't want to lie, so he just laughed. And I saw him really trying to tell the truth, not trying to lie. Yes, it's true. We are still intervening in foreign elections, and I think the ones he's been thinking about are recent elections in Bulgaria, in Mongolia, in Slovakia. The National Endowment for Democracy, which you mentioned, has taken over many of these functions from the CIA. It's a pretty unknown agency, but it was founded by President Reagan in the early 80s for a particular reason. You'll remember that at that time, the CIA had been suffering from many scandals, and it couldn't operate the way it used to. So how are we going to influence foreign elections? Well, we established this National Endowment for Democracy, which is now funded at over $170 million a year. And that's all it does. It interferes in the politics of other countries. Much of its money goes through something called the International Republican Institute, headed by John McCain, and the National Democratic Institute, headed by Madeleine Albright. So you have these relentless interventionists working under a larger board that includes people like Victoria Nuland, who was in Ukraine as Assistant Secretary of State, handing out chocolate chip cookies to protesters, urging them to overthrow their government. Elliot Abrams, who was involved in the interventions in Nicaragua and elsewhere during the 1980s. So the National Endowment for Democracy has now taken on the job of interfering in the politics of other countries for what Mr. Woolsey called very good reasons, when there's a very good cause, to defend democracy. So I like his phrase. He said something like, we only do it for a very good cause. Well, that's a very flexible definition. Every country can define what a good cause is from its point of view. So if you feel that you have the right to intervene in the politics of another country and try to shape the results of its election because it's a good cause, then you have to realize that other countries will make the same rational calculation. We cannot be outraged when other countries are doing on a smaller scale what we've taught the world how to do over more than 100 years. Actually, this is one of the main jobs of the National Endowment for Democracy. It sends money and advisors into other countries, and it teaches them how do you make computer lists, how do you organize demonstrations, how do you make political meetings, how do you start a newspaper. These are all the building tools that we try to spread in other countries where there are governments of which we don't approve. Now, the National Endowment for Democracy published a report in 2013 in which they said Russia continues to be the priority country. Soon after that, the Russians banned National Endowment for Democracy from working in Russia. Now the NED is working in all the countries around Russia. It's working in Kosovo and Serbia. It's working in Moldova. It's working in Ukraine. It's working in Belarus. So we are trying to foment anti-Russia movements in countries all around Russia with the aim, ultimately, of having the big prize of somehow being able to turn Russia into a country that would be subservient.